Jessica Bolduc, or Jess, is from Anishinaabeg Nation and lives in Bawating, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, the traditional territory of her Ojibwe ancestors. Through her family, she has developed a hunger for adventure and a deep connection to the land. Jess is a dreamer, a translator, an edge walker, and a web weaver. Gifts she brings to her role bridging Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth in conversation about their contributions to reconciliation as the Executive Director of the 4Rs Youth Movement. Please welcome Jess Bolduc.
Ani Bojo, Jessica Ndijnakas, Bawatin Ndonjaba, Makwan Dodem, Ojibwe Anishinaabe Kwayan Dao. I introduce you in my language because this week I was reminded how much of an act of resistance, of resilience, of resurgence that is for Indigenous people. Because at one time it was a possibility that my language would have been extinct. And it's a great reminder also to acknowledge the history of the lands that we are on here today. The Wendat people, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, who called these lands home for thousands of years, and the Métis Nation and the Mississaugas of the New Credit who have come here over time. And Toronto is in the Treaty of the Dish with One Spoon. And that treaty reminds us we only have one dish, one Mother Earth. And so it's our collective responsibility to take only what we can and to share equally. And this treaty is something that belongs to all of us, all of you here in this room, because it was about the nations that were there, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, as well as the plants, the land, and the water, and the animals. A treaty of peace, friendship, relationship, and belonging that encompassed us all. So I say Chimigwech, thank you to the land of the people of Toronto who are here now and who have been here over generations, because it's such a powerful place to be speaking here today. So this is me. This is me along the coast of Lake Superior, and that's my home. And it's really special to me because my Ojibwe ancestors had been traveling there for thousands of years. And in my creation story, in the Anishinaabe creation story, we are told that we are the most beautiful people in creation. And that isn't about being better than anyone or being proud. It's about acknowledging that we have self-love and community love. And we were told that babies are gifts. And we were raised with the values of humility, of wisdom, of truth, of honesty, of respect and love. And these values shaped our nations, and they created a sense of belonging between ourselves, our community, our land, and our spirit. But that is not the story of belonging that I grew up with. Over the last 150 years, Canada has thought of Indigenous people differently. We have been treated as though we were savages. Our values were disrespected. And our connection to land, to spirit, to community, and to self, our sense of belonging, was destroyed. And that was the goal of the Canadian government. And so came hundreds of years of assimilative and genocidal policies that tore apart our communities, our cultures, and our languages, and created a place where we are refugees on our own land. And so I am a product of a post-colonial entanglement of identity. I grew up off-reserve, disconnected from culture, a sense of shame because I was an Indian, and that meant that there were stereotypes that I knew that existed about who I was, but also shame because I didn't think that I was Indian enough. and I was confused about my identity, and I didn't know where I belonged. And I became to learn that my worth and my sense of belonging here in Canada was not defined by who I was as an Indigenous person, but rather defined by how well I was able to assimilate. And so being Indigenous in Canada was not about being the most beautiful person in creation. Being an Indigenous person in Canada today means that my life expectancy is low. It means that I am more likely to end up in jail than a non-Indigenous person. As a woman, I'm 3 times more likely to experience violence in my life. That I might not have access to clean drinking water, and that I may feel so little about my self-worth that I may take my own life. These truths are our history. This intergenerational trauma is all around us. The systems that exist in Canada today continue to oppress Indigenous people. And this history is new to some of us. It was new to me. And that's a process that we're in about truth and reconciliation in Canada today. In 2014, my life changed. I started to not see myself as an Indian, but as an Anishinaabe person. And I was part of a group of young people who came to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to listen to the testimonies of survivors of residential schools in Canada. And for once, I felt like I had a purpose in life. And that was to change the way that society saw me as an Indigenous person, to change that conversation and change that story. And with 130 young people, we created a vision for the 4 Hours Youth Movement that strengthened our identity and unity in our diversity was going to create a possible Canada not yet imagined. And so what is it going to take in a time of truth and reconciliation to restore belonging to Indigenous people? It's going to take relationships. Justice Murray Sinclair said, and he was inspired by testimonies of over 7,000 survivors, that reconciliation is about forging and maintaining respectful relationships. And I see these relationships between the land, between self, between communities, and spirit. And that's the reconciliation that we need to build here in Canada. And that's what we're building as young people in Canada. And we know that before we come together to seed new relationships and engage in dialogue around reconciliation, we need to reflect on the path that has brought us here. And that's the path of our shared history, that entanglement. And while potentially struggling with this past, we're able to uncover a future that belongs to all of us. And I'm not alone in thinking about this. Young people are rising up all across the country to protect the water, to protect the land, to build respectful relationships, to create a sense of belonging, a sense of place for everyone. And at the 4 Hours Youth Movement, we're one of those groups. And through respect, reciprocity, and relevance, we can be creating a positive and reconciliation with integrity. But reconciliation starts from where we're standing. And so as I continue to build relationships and build community with the 4 Hours Youth Movement, I'm also finding my way back to my Anishinaabe-ness, finding my way back to myself. And so for those of you who are edge walking like me, with a foot in a world of a modern world and a way of reclaiming our traditions and our culture, I say to you, belonging is not defined by what has happened to you. Belonging is defined by who you are. So be brave, be fearless, understand love, be wild and crazy, and remember to trust here. Because here is where belonging starts and where your belonging will be for you forever. Miigwech.